Good evening everyone. Thank you for joining us either in person or online. I would like to start by first acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I reside on Bundjalung country on the lands of the Yugambeh and Kumbameri saltwater people. My children are learning the Yugambeh language through their schooling, and as a family we recognise that the land on which we personally reside in Mount Nathan was never ceded and was and always will remain their land. My name is Shaan Ross-Smith and I'm a little bit nervous. But aside from that, I'm a proud Griffith alumni and the director of the MATE program, which I'll talk about in a moment. But first, the Griffith Alumni Network. They're committed to creating opportunities for alumni and students by providing access to a range of benefits and services, networking opportunities, lifelong learning, professional development, social events and much, much more, including events just like tonight's panel. We have hoped to hold this event in person, but with current restrictions that makes it a lot more difficult. Tonight's a really special event. Griffith is committed to highlighting the role of the bystander in preventing violence and disrespect. We hope by the end of the session you'll have an understanding of what disrespectful behaviour looks like, the confidence to be able to call it out and ultimately take action or be part of the solution. But first, I'd like to introduce my friend, one of the most incredible women I know. Let me introduce the Honourable Shannon Fentiman MP, Attorney General and Minister for Justice, Minister for Women and Minister for the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence. Thank you.
Oh, Shaan, my speech.
Oh. You might need that.
Thank you so much, Shaan, and I'm delighted to be joining you all today. Can I also start by respectfully acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Turrbal and Yagara people here, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Can I also acknowledge Shaan Ross-Smith, Anushka Dowling from the MATE Bystander program, Rachel Durden from the Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Council, Gavin Nichols from Telstra, Paul Melville from Halcyon and Professor Patrick O'Leary from Griffith University, who you'll all be hearing from very, very soon. It's a wonderful panel tonight and such a wonderful event. So really it's my job to welcome you all to this event tonight, and as Shaan knows well, I've been a big fan of the world-leading MATE Bystander program for quite some time. The MATE Bystander program is training Queenslanders to understand problematic behaviours and to intervene as an active bystander proactively and when it's safe to do so. Our biggest safety net for women and children experiencing violence and coercive control is our community. Everyone has a part to play to call out violence and to help keep women and children safe. That's why I'm so proud that the Queensland Government has been able to invest in the partnership with Griffith University and Telstra to develop the Bystander app. This will put a vital tool into the hands of friends, family members, neighbours and community members, helping them to recognise the signs of violence and control and to find the right way to intervene and support their friends and family. Too many people look back with regret at signs that at the time didn't make a lot of sense to them. They didn't quite appreciate or understand what may have been happening. They recall in hindsight the behaviours that they learned too late add up to coercive control. I want to, and this project will, give some power back to those people who attend vigils and rallies in the name of someone they know or someone that they've lost. The new app is expected to be ready to launch later this year as the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force also prepares their report on how to best legislate against coercive control. And I look forward to receiving their report in October. But we know that government alone won't be able to change culture, attitudes and behaviours. We've got to engage our whole community to call out this behaviour right back at where it starts, to add up all the pieces so that they can recognise these dangerous patterns of behaviour. So there is still absolutely more to do, and the app will help and the discussion tonight will help. So thank you all for being here tonight and watching online. And I particularly want to thank Shaan, Griffith University, Gavin and Telstra for their teams and their ongoing commitment to this project. Enjoy the night.
What a woman. That's leadership. That to me is absolute leadership. Shannon is a woman who leads through her actions, and tonight is testament to that. She's finished work for the day. She's chosen to be here with us to introduce tonight's panel around looking at leadership and the role of the bystander in being someone who does something. I think we need more humans like Shannon in the world, and we're so fortunate to have her support on our project, but in the state of Queensland. So thank you so much, Shannon, for being here tonight. We want to encourage discussion after tonight's session, so please share any key takeaways from today using the hashtag Griffith Alumni on your social platforms such as Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. And there's probably way more social media networks that I don't know exist. Tonight isn't just any old panel. The people I'm surrounded with tonight are famous to me. They're like the Nelson Mandelas or the Gloria Steinems of the world in which I operate. I'm a passionate anti-violence activist. I'm the director of a program called MATE, an initiative of Griffith University. The program is a personal leadership program focused on the role of the bystander in the elimination of gender-based violence. We facilitate our program across Australia, New Zealand and more recently into the UK. The point is to do myself out of work. That's the point. It's my end goal. Violence against women is 100% preventable. But after 15 years of working in the prison system, what I've learnt is that I cannot do this work on my own, and nor do I want to. The prisons are overflowing, our refuges are full. The phone calls to services like DV Connect exceeded 137,000 calls last year. And yet we know that most violence against women is unrecorded. The people on the panel have listened to that. As CEOs and senior leaders within their organisations, it would have been easy to say that instead they were going to focus on profit margins and growth. But they listened to the plight of our sector and they leaned in. I'm going to very quickly introduce them, but I'd love for them to share with you why they're personally invested in being the change. Firstly, Rachel Durden. I call her the CEO of Rio Tinto. I know that she's not technically the CEO, but that's just a minor detail. Her official title is Chief Advisor, Social and Stakeholder Engagement, Corporate Relations at Rio Tinto. But she will always be the CEO to me because Rachel has been instrumental in driving the domestic and family violence initiatives within Rio Tinto, which have been recognised by our very own government in asking Rachel to be on the Domestic Violence Prevention Council. I warmly welcome Rach here tonight. Gavin, right down the end. Where do I start? Gavin Nichols is the General Manager of Telstra in government. He and I have been conspiring behind the scenes for some time now about different ways that we can take over the world. Every time we talk about it, it's world-changing type stuff. So when Gavin and I had the opportunity to build a world-first bystander app together with funding from the Queensland Government, we jumped at the chance. And here we are today, halfway through the app build. What a legend Gavin is. So welcome, Gavin. And Paul, one of my most favourite humans. And while he always asks me what I've signed him up for next with an eye roll, he does all the things I ask of him. But what you might not be aware of is that Paul and his incredible wife Marie built a world's first transitional housing, which houses up to 12 people impacted by domestic and family violence at any one time. Paul partnered with Mirvac when he was the CEO of Halcyon, who donated the land, and together they called out over 90 suppliers to build a standalone, big, beautiful house that women and their children can reside in for up to a year while they're rebuilding their lives. And that's what these women have done. And if I could tell you the impact, the stories, the personal stories of these women and how they've rebuilt their lives, everyone would be in tears. I'll ask Paul to talk more about that in a moment, but Paul was the CEO and co-director of Halcyon, but I understand that maybe he's now taken a different path. So I'll leave that to Paul to talk more about that. Okay. And my mate here, my good friend and colleague, my mentor and boss, Professor Patrick O'Leary. What a rare gem. The most selfless, giving, incredible, passionate change maker. Patrick is the Professor of everything, but the co-lead of the Disrupting Violence Beacon, a newly formed beacon at Griffith University, the director of the Violence Research and Prevention Program, co-chief editor of the International Social Work, Griffith Criminology Institute and School of Health Sciences and Social Work. So he's not that busy, really. Okay, so let's get into it. As influencers and business leaders, I suppose there's this rare ability or responsibility to impact society more broadly and outside of your own professional sphere. I also know that there's a need to generate profit. But in turning a profit and doing good, can those two things go hand in hand? So I want to put that out to the whole panel. If you can answer that question, can we do both? Make a profit and do social good?
Thank you, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here tonight. Shaan, I think it's a great question because absolutely, business has to survive and make profit, otherwise business doesn't exist. But business also has a responsibility, as we believe, to help the communities in which we operate and also more broadly help solve with partners like government and others some of the big societal challenges. And that's one of the reasons why we believe that everyone deserves to be safe at work and safe at home and should go home and be in a respectful relationship. So to me it's absolutely critical that it's not just about making money, it's how you make it and what your contribution is to, the broader society. And that's changing, those expectations are changing daily, so you have to respond to stay relevant in society.
And Rach, Rio Tinto has stakeholders. So how do stakeholders respond to Rio doing so much internally for your staff?
I think people are surprised that a big mining company, a big global mining company can do so much for our people. We know that we're part of society. Our people live in society, so no one's immune to it, whether they're people experiencing violence or using violence. So our external stakeholders are often shocked and surprised to hear that this is something that Rio Tinto stand for. But it comes from a deep place of caring for our people, and that's really important. I remember a couple of years ago, back in the day when we could jump on planes and travel around the world, I was with one of our executives at the UN talking about our domestic violence work, and civil society from around the world were shocked that a big mining company that, mining companies don't have good reputations. They're a bit like banks. We don't have anyone from banks here. But, it's just, they're not loved. But it started a different dialogue, so it's absolutely critical.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to answer that question?
Yeah, sure, Shaan. I'm very fortunate to work for a company that takes its corporate social responsibility very seriously. So not only that, but we've got a CEO who's a very strong and passionate leader in a lot of social matters as well, particularly domestic and family violence. So it makes it a lot easier for people like me to lean into these issues and make a contribution at whether it's a state level or anywhere else. And with that in mind, the things that we do, we sort of don't take them for granted, but we know that we play a huge role out there in society, and we need to make sure that we do what we do every day to ensure people remain connected, vulnerable parts of our community remain connected and can do the things that they need to do, like stay in contact with family and also stay in contact with their support services as well to enable them to get by in their day-to-day life. So we provide programs like the Safe Connections program, where we provide mobile phones to victims of domestic and family violence, and also network access so they can remain connected as and when they need to. And there's lots of other programs that we get involved in, but from a technology perspective, technology is very, pervasive in all of our lives, and in any sort of intervention that needs to play out in these sort of big social issues, technology needs to play probably more of a role. And that's why I'm so excited to work with Shaan to work on the MATE Bystander app program. We think it'll make a huge change and a huge difference to people's lives, and really excited to see it completed before the end of the year.
I suppose while we're on that topic, Gavin, can you explain to people listening, what is the Bystander app? What are we creating together?
So it's a piece of software, I guess, which is it takes a form in an application that will sit on smart devices, so your Apple iPhone or any other smart device for that matter as well. And what it will enable is, I'll put in my own words, but I've done the MATE Bystander program about 3 or 4 times now and loved each and every time I've done it. But when you walk away from doing that program, you don't remember everything that you might like to remember as and when you're called upon to actually remember it. So what this app will do, it'll be like a little ready reckoner, if you will, on your mobile device that you can pull out whenever you need to or choose to, either to refresh the tips and tricks that you may have learned, but then also if you are confronted with a particular circumstance where you do need to either respond or get involved in any way, shape or form, you can pick up the device and learn how to do that in a very safe and responsible way with maximum impact. And so this digital tool, if you will be something that people can carry around with them and enable them to not be a bystander going forward and give them confidence and a tool, if you will, to that they can sort of rely upon to just refresh your memory about what it is they should and shouldn't be doing.
100%, and I'm so excited to be delivering this app to the public because I think it's a game changer in terms of exactly what you said. Often I think we're all good humans mostly that want to do the right thing, but in the moment where we see something or hear something or sense something isn't right, we often just need that something, that nudge that says, hey, I've got you, here's some things that you might be able to say or do. And so I think that's what the app, it's going to be like a constant companion in your pocket that says, hey, I got you and you can keep coming back to me and I can keep giving you some tips. So I'm so excited to see where we take that, and Gavin's been so generous in providing us with the time and resources we need to make this happen. So a real game changer, I think.
I think It also provides us a platform going forward as well, Shaan, that if we want to iterate into the future and actually build other things upon it to whether it's to improve or to provide other functionality, the platform's there to enable us to do that.
Absolutely. This is just the start of how else can we support people? How else how can that look into the future? So I love it. It's like building a little community, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah. Thanks, Gavin. Paul, so I want to talk to you. I want to take you right back, and I know it was a few years ago now, but I want to take you right back to when you originally came up with the concept of perhaps building a refuge for women in domestic violence situations, and what happened next. So how did that come about, and then what happened?
Well, I guess the concept, I have to give full credit to my wife who's in the audience tonight, Marie, and it was her persistence early on that saw Bella Sanctuary reach fruition. It was particularly easy getting support from the Halcyon group, the owners of Halcyon. It was a lot more difficult getting DV Connect on board, Shaan, as you know, because it was such a different proposition. And I think what we both learnt from that process was there was a lot of fear when you try and put a very strong not-for-profit organisation with a private company, a smaller to medium-sized private company. And the learning for us at Halcyon was that you have to understand that. We thought that you go and saw someone and said, here, look, we want to do this. We want to give you a block of land and build a building, and everyone's going to come out and give you a hug and say that's a fantastic idea. However, the reticence was because firstly it hadn't been done before. Secondly, this is a bit unusual, and we could get left with a bigger issue here. What if Halcyon doesn't keep its promises? What if Mirvac doesn't keep its promises? So for all of those other businesses that are contemplating it, I encourage everyone to step into the shoes of the partner that you're partnering with and look at it from their perspective. And Marie was particularly good at that. I was a little more impatient, saying, we want to get this moving, we want to make it happen. Why is it taking so long? But there was a process that DV Connect had to go through, and Marie was respectful of that process, And I think that was the massive learning. And I think next time it's not going to be so hard. But for those other businesses that are looking at doing it, just take the time, because the outcome is it's sad to say, but it is fantastic, the outcome for the women and children of Bella Sanctuary. I'd just like to say thanks for the invitation, Shaan, too. It's a privilege to be sitting up here with other members of the panel. Did that answer the question?
It really did, and Paul, you're still generous when you speak so eloquently about how that came about. But actually, when Halcyon approached DV Connect and said we would like to build a refuge, it was like when you get those text messages saying you've won $15 million and you need to respond within 15 minutes, or you've lost it. Because why would a big corporate want to do something like that? What's the catch? To an organisation like DV Connect, who's a crisis response, a crisis phone service that works 24/7 responding, getting an offer like that was so foreign to them. So the journey was, this can't be for real. What's the catch? We don't have anyone on our board of volunteers that's ever built anything before. We're not builders, we're not architects. So the journey was a really organic journey that we went on together, of Marie so beautifully saying there is no catch, and us saying, yeah, but like the little bits that might be a catch, what are they? To having this state-of-the-art, this housing opportunity. And I suppose in a moment we'll talk a little bit more about that journey, because it didn't end up being a refuge in the end. It ended up being something different, similar but different. And so I think the learning for me was that you as a corporate really leaned into the sector about not what was just gonna, it wasn't about Halcyon at all. It was about what the sector needed. And I think sometimes in the corporate world, what can happen is we have the best intent, or the corporates have the best intent, but because they're not listening to what is needed, it doesn't land. So I think for me that was a great opportunity for that co-education, but for you to go, no, we genuinely want what you need.
And for us, there was an alignment between our customer and the occupants of Bella Sanctuary. It was all about making people's lives better and doing it in a long-term way, not a short-term way. It was a long-term solution. So if you get the alignment between your own purpose and the purpose of the organisation you're with, that's where you get turbocharged the outcome.
Yeah, and so we didn't end up building a refuge, Paul. What did we end up building?
We built a transitional housing project. It's 2 one-bedroom units, 2 two-bedroom units, and 1 three-bedroom unit. Obviously, we can't take you all there, and we've actually produced a video on it, which we're more than happy to share with anyone actually in the world. And it was designed specifically for mothers and children. One of the one-bedroom units was the first that was designed particularly for people with a disability. And it's really 5 homes within a suburb in the Gold Coast. When you drive through the area, it just looks like a big home, which was part of the magic of the architecture. An interesting story about it is that Mirvac, who donated the block of land, I think it took them about 16 minutes to say yes. They had to survey everyone that was buying a block of land around where this Bella Sanctuary was being built. And they were a bit fearful of that, the old NIMBY syndrome, but there was not one person that had an objection to it. And I think that's a sign that society is aware of this issue and wants to do its best. The Bella Sanctuary also has the provision for a staff member of DV Connect to be there, but it's a home, and the stories which Shaan can tell better than I, it's a success, because the success is the mums and the kids get to move on to permanent housing. So it's that transition.
And what we knew is that in the sector we had a bottleneck in refuges, so we were unable to move women out of refuge because there was nowhere for them to go except for perhaps back to the violence. So when Halcyon leaned in and said, what does the sector actually need? We said, well, we need 1,000 refuges, but actually what we need more urgently than that is something longer term, something for these women where they can set up home, their children can have some stable education, they can gain employment in the local community, they can get embedded, in terms of local community projects, psychs and counsellors in the area, and let them settle there for a moment. And the coolest part about where it is that a lot of the women who have transitioned out of there have moved into the local area anyway, because you set it up in a place where there was all that infrastructure. So that was so important and a real game changer, which means we now have somewhere for these women to go. And we would love to see more corporates follow in Paul and Marie's footsteps and do something like that into the future. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. I know everyone in the audience has probably got a huge amount of questions to ask everyone on the panel. So if you do, there's actually a little speech bubble that people can access and start asking questions, and they'll be delivered straight through to me, and I can ask them of the panel members for everyone that's tuning in at home. Patrick, may I please ask you a question? Sure. You've heard from 3 major corporates who are changing the world, right? Who are doing things that are changing the world. Now, as much as I'd like to think that it's the organisations they work for, I still think that we've got 3 big personalities here who are the driving forces behind this. What if we had more of this leadership in corporate Australia? What could it mean, and what is the link between that and the elimination of violence against women? Why is it so important for corporates to be doing this type of work and embed it in their organisation?
Thanks, Shaan, and thanks very much everyone for being here tonight, and it's a great pleasure to be here. The question is such an important question because it picks up on some things that people have already said. The Attorney General and Shaan, we can't do all this on our own. We can't change and eliminate violence on our own. No one entity can. And that beginning question about profit is actually a question also about cost, because violence costs our society so much. It costs our productivity, it costs our systems, our health systems, our justice systems. And without that cultural change of making a very clear statement about where we stand on violence, it continues to unwittingly support violence when we don't speak out about it, when corporates stay silent about it. And the research is really clear about that cultural change that corporates can not only bring with actions, but also what they provide their employees, what we teach our graduates, talking to alumni tonight. I mean, employers are looking for graduates who have a sense of their responsibility to be respectful, to understand violence, to understand discrimination. They should be givens when someone joins a corporate or the workforce. So I think we need that momentum from corporates. We need that partnership, and there's an immensely powerful message when a large corporation makes a statement.
What is the message? When a large corporation makes the statement and does the work, what message are we giving to broader society?
Well, we're saying this is not okay. We don't stand for this. We're saying that our values are clear about violence against women, violence against children. Our values are clear about discrimination. But we're also saying that there's not a place for this to be tolerated. And I think that's really encouraging with a number of programs with corporates, also balancing how they support employees who, for example, domestic violence leave that employees may need to take, and providing that support when people really need it. because that is showing a very clear position. And vice versa, there's things we can do for men who perpetrate violence in the employee space.
Patrick, I'm glad that you brought up domestic violence leave because particularly during COVID, there was a large, we received a large amount of calls from corporates saying, what do we do about perpetrators? What is our policy position, particularly around perpetrators and maintaining their employment if the employer was to find out that they are perpetrating violence? Do you have a position on this? What do you think should happen?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important question. I think more corporates and government are thinking about this, and it's not a clear decision about, for example, dismissing a perpetrator, because your impact actually could be on the women and children of losing that income. So how would you support a man who's used violence in a way that holds him accountable both to his family and to the culture you're creating in that corporate environment? So I think that's such a critical thing in terms of how we give that message to the man without making the situation potentially more dangerous or more unsafe for that woman that is often might be invisible to the employer. Yeah. So there's an accountability of the employer to the man's partner and children. And I think, there needs to be consequences, but we need to think carefully about what those consequences are and how we hold men accountable.
Great. I think we should circle back to that in a moment because I think that's a really important conversation to be having, Patrick. Rach, I've got the first question from the people at home, and it is, how can we manage up and influence our CEOs and executives to take a stand on violence in the workplace if they're perhaps not doing that?
Great question. I'll do it really quickly, but when I started the work at Rio Tinto, I remember when I heard about this thing called domestic violence and women being murdered. It was 2015, and I was in a room in Sydney. There's a view into the corner of the harbour, and it was like, oh, this is fabulous. And then all of a sudden someone starts of, so far this year, 51 women have been murdered by a current or former intimate partner. And to me, I just sat upright and went, wow, that's terrible. I need to understand more. And for me, I needed to take that back into our workplace and up the chain and have many conversations, but tell stories and get other people to tell stories and make the statistics real, so it's not just 1 in 3. I think there was a Facebook, or it was a web page called Destroy the Joint, and it had pictures of women that had been murdered. And at one stage it was a huge thing, so I picked out a few and told the stories of these women and shared that with the decent men of Rio Tinto. And when you link that to the company purpose and the values of what we want to do, it just sparks people into action. And to me, the key is storytelling and getting them to listen and also understand, and we're still listening and learning and doing more listening and learning from the sector. How do we do things better? How can we contribute in the communities in which we operate? So key is that engagement. You do need someone with passion. You need everyone with passion, but it's not always going to happen. And just keep having those conversations and look for the right moments. I think you've got to be patient and get those right moments to create the opportunities for people to hear someone's story, and it will activate them. It sounds pretty simple. It takes a bit of time and strategy, but it does work.
Because, Rach, people would be surprised to hear that it's not your day job. The domestic and family violence stuff is like an aside, and you've actually got a day job because you're so accessible to the sector as well to say, and you're the first person I call whenever anyone on the whole planet says we need some help with this. Rach will be onto it, and if not, she'll find someone that is. But it's not your day job. And so it still was driven by that passion that you had to end it. And so you're saying the link for you was to hear those statistics, to hear the real stuff, to connect with the sector. Yeah,
it was to hear the real stuff, and it was terrible. It was perfect timing, but terrible. We had, I think in 2015, there were murders on the Gold Coast. There was someone in Brisbane who was murdered who someone at work knew who he was, the guy who'd actually murdered because he'd worked for a mining contractor company. So it wasn't a direct link, but it was, the sector knows, our industry knows everybody across that. So there were just these connections and it just didn't feel right. And for me at the time, and I didn't understand why it didn't feel right, but it was like fatalities. We want to drive out fatalities in our industry. We shouldn't be killing people at work. And so they shouldn't be killed at home either, unnecessarily through disrespect. But it wasn't until, I mean, you asked the question, you haven't asked us yet, but what drives us? It took a while to drive that. I realised that my mum had experienced, different forms of abuse, but it wasn't until I understood what that was that I was aware of that. It was far too late because she'd passed away of other reasons. But it's like, if I had have known, and now I hope more of our workforce know and understand, and a vast proportion of them do, that they can change either their behaviours or what someone in their family is going through.
There's always a personal link to domestic and family violence,
And you
isn't there?
don't realise it, not all the time. And so many people I've spoken to at work, and even senior leaders, so we've got a number of CEOs in our company, but one of them, in one of your training sessions that you ran, Shaan, broke down in tears because she was helping somebody in her network that week. And it's a deep connection. And then another one who's a CEO of another business tells me that this happened in her family, and then somebody else. So once you start that conversation, it gives people the opportunity to share that as you go forward. So it's being brave, being vulnerable, and having those hard conversations that aren't about profit, but it's about people's wellness and respect.
And I think another thing that you and I both learnt at the same time, Rach, delivering into Rio Tinto, was that your staff got a real sense of safety in that moment, that if they were to disclose at work, they were going to be seen and validated and believed and supported, that you were taking this really seriously, that you were consistent with your messaging, with your training, with your upskilling. That to me was so important. You could see it because we had disclosures, we had people coming forward saying, I want to set up a group, I want to set up a network, I want to go and walk with other men, you had all this action or activism that came out of you doing, you saying this is really important to our organisation.
Yeah, and it takes time, and to go to Paul's point before, it's not about doing it fast, it's staying the course. And keeping consistent with the message, and it's not at all costs, but you've got to pick the right timing and just keep it going. I mean, in those sessions, Shaan, I remember we were in Gladstone, and I think we did 3 sessions over 2 days, I think it was, and it was the first time we'd run the Alison's Gift bystander training. And in one of the day where we did 2, I think we'd had like 12 disclosures of people that had experienced that either themselves or in their family. And it was just, wow, this is really interesting that we've created a culture that people know that it's safe to be able to share.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Paul, I think you did that too. I think you had some 90 odd suppliers who you approached, who came and did the painting and did the all of those things, who were on their own journey of self-discovery in this space, weren't they?
That's right, and there was a lot of learnings out of that, and one of them was that everyone wants to help, but they often need to be shown a way and given an opportunity. And of the 90 contractors and suppliers, they all benefited in so many ways. There's one example I'll give of the electricians, the Sparkies. What they did was actually used it as a whole of organisation training program. So the principals flew up from Sydney back when travel was a bit easier, and they worked on the house themselves. So that brought them closer together, but it also gave them a far greater understanding of domestic violence. And it was at the point where, one of the other major suppliers, Reece, they reached out and said, okay, how can we offer traineeships for children of victims of domestic violence? So it just doing something which had a good outcome, it had all of these other spin-off benefits in addition to the outcome itself. And I think through the Halcyon organisation, it touched every employee in some way, and through the retirement communities, there was a massive support through that. So it actually just increased the awareness of the whole issue enormously. And if I could just jump on one of the things Rachel's answer to your question, how do you wake up a CEO that's not aware of it? No, you sack them. I mean, honestly, in today's world, if a CEO is not aware of the issue, then they're asleep at the wheel. And I think that is something that the board of that company or the shareholders of that company, should take note of, because it's just so real. So it's something that people should be dealing with within their own workforce and within their own customer base. So now that I'm sort of semi-retired, I can be a little more
I love that.
outspoken than I may have been in the past. But I'd like to think I would have said it 12 months ago. It's one thing being ignorant, but if it's brought to your attention and you remain ignorant, that's a whole other story.
Yeah. Paul, I've got another question from the people at home for you. And that is that we're talking a lot about major corporates, but what is the role of smaller organisations, and is there a collective approach for smaller organisations to band together? And I suppose that's what you were just talking about.
We're not a big business. I've got on either side of me two, enormous corporates who make an enormous difference to society. We're 140 employees, so we're not enormous. We're mid-size, I guess. And all of the suppliers and contractors banded together to build, basically a 5-unit complex.
Yeah.
And they all did their bit. And they got as much out of it as everyone else had contributed to that project. So the benefits, and it is, have a look at the video, because we had some suppliers and contractors speak at the opening, and they really, the question they all asked at the end of it is, when's the next one? So it was never a burden for anyone. You don't have to be big to make a difference in this field. You've just got to do your bit. But it's up to the medium organisations and the larger ones to lead and lead, because it's often harder for the small business to start. They need to hook in with others to make it a bit easier.
Gavin, got a question for you. Thanks, Paul. So, Barack Obama refers to those who agitate for social change as the progress. That's the progress. And funnily enough, last night I was showing my sons games that I used to play on my Commodore 64. So they said, oh wow, so basic. I took it to your team this morning, my conversation with my sons about California games and where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. But back then, they were incredible. Those games were incredible. I still think they are. But it took pioneers, I suppose, to challenge status quo, to say we could probably innovate, we could probably get better at this, we could probably do different things here. And I think that's probably what we're talking about tonight, is that we're never going to, the end game is for us all to be unemployed, right? But how do we tip business upside down and keep creating that major social change that we need? How do we keep agitating? How do we keep being the squeaky wheel, is my question.
I guess in many ways, innovation is really, I guess, at the heart of this particular conversation. And organisations like, if you look at the history of Telstra, it's been around for 100 years. We were, used to be a basic telephone company. Now we're into all things. We've got a couple of thousand people over in Silicon Valley that does a lot of research and development for Telstra, brings all that goodness back into Australia, and it enables us to stay current on the world stage in terms of innovative type technology. And your experience with the the Commodore 64 versus current technology, it's through those sort of investments and that, I guess, commitment to continue to challenge the business model that you've got and find new ways of, making life easier for our customers and, the people that we serve. And, I think that's really at the heart of it, Shaan. And, we can't, none of us can really afford, from a business perspective, to stand still and sit on your laurels and think that you've got this, all nutted out and, you're on top of your game. You're only there for a short time, and you've just got to continue to innovate and think about, how you can improve things and what the next, big thing is, if you will.
Yes.
So, it's a continuing feast. And but as the challenges of society and others, continue to, raise their ugly heads, there's sort of there's many ways you can solve those particular challenges and problems. And certainly, in my view, technology can play a big role in that. And it's up to us to work with people like yourselves and others to understand what the challenge and the business problem is, or not necessarily a business problem, but the challenge is, and then try and solve for that in leveraging technology and looking how we can do things differently.
And what I love about what you've been doing recently is that you're doing that at this end, you're creating and innovating, but also you've gone back and had a look at your payphones recently, and you've done something pretty cool with them. Do you want to share with everyone what you've done with them?
Yeah, so every payphone in Australia now is free. There's no cost associated with using them, and that decision was made about 2 weeks ago. When you consider the use of payphones, we do there's about 11 million calls go through those payphones a year. That call rate has doubled in the last 2 weeks since they've been free. Wow. Now, if we do the analysis in terms of what calls are being made, there was quite a large chunk of it was calling 000 and things like that. But there's also a large chunk of calling, social service type help services. So whether it be DV Connect, whether it be, any other support service out there, there's quite a large proportion of those calls in that mix as well. And what that says to us is that, the vulnerable members of our community are probably the largest cohort that uses those payphones, and on that basis, we should make them, free of charge, which we've done. Now, it wasn't the only reason why, but it was certainly one of the large, contributing factors as to why Telstra did what they did.
Positive social change.
Absolutely.
I love that stuff. Thanks, Gavin. So, Patrick, I have a question for you now. Why is there not stricter management of perpetrators and having them removed from the home, with imprisonment being a deterrent for a breach? To do this would allow children to live in the same suburb, attend the same school and maintain the same peer group. Children suffer so much when they are uprooted. In the meantime, put the perpetrator in a multi-bed facility with a requirement that they maintain employment, financial support into the family unit and undergo relevant courses. Could you speak to that?
I love that question.
It's a great question.
It's a very important question, and it's such an important question about what sort of change and who bears the responsibility when there's violence. And this is something that you and I see in different work that we do, that often is the woman and children who have to move, and the man's not left accountable. But even more so, not left financially accountable.
Yep.
And so this question really highlights an important initiative about how we can actually change that balance and things like technology could actually protect a situation like this. Yep. Something we learn very much in research is technology can be used in domestic violence for harm, but it can be also used for good. Yeah. I think also that requires, in responding to that question, that partnership between the employer, between the social services that are involved, between the courts, to actually come up with a suitable arrangement that actually does provide some justice, but also keeps the family doing what they need to do, which is often mums say, some work we're doing at the research we're doing at the moment, mums say, what I need is, like all parents, I need to keep the show on the road. I need to get the kids to school, I need to get to appointments, I need to do all these things.
Yep.
And what domestic violence does is stops all that.
Yep. So what you're saying, Patrick, what I think I just heard you say, is wouldn't it be great if we worked alongside Rio Tinto as the employer, and we had a system in place where we held the perpetrator accountable. We worked in with an organisation like Rio where we said, we will keep this person employed, but they must do X, Y and Z, live here, do this. So actually bringing in corporates or employers into the case management, if you will, of a perpetrator.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Absolutely. And I think by doing that, Rachel, we could actually, it could be benefits all round, because that man's accountable for a change project that he's going to make.
Yeah.
He's still responsible for restitution and responsibility. Because we know that, purely an adversarial approach isn't always helpful, and it isn't always what families want.
Yeah, sure.
But something like this provides some common ground. Just want to make one comment too, particularly what Paul was saying about tradesmen coming in. That awareness to actually also, for that man going to a perpetrator program, being employed, and his other colleagues to actually also hold him to account. Particularly in male-dominated areas where, the dominant ideas of masculinity, to have a culture where they're calling things out. That wasn't okay, that joke wasn't okay. Changes that culture, but also builds that whole accountability across the whole business. And it's where I'd want to buy things from.
I love what you're saying, because what you're saying is so that the tradies that may have gone and fitted the plugs in the transitional homes, that home that Paul built, will now provide a protective factor to their colleagues in the workplace, or their mates at wherever they are, at the pub or going for a run, saying, "No, mate, I went and worked on this project, and there's women that have to go and live here because there's violence in the home. I don't think what you said was okay." So you're actually now creating this network of bystanders, effective bystanders, that are going to challenge some of that thinking because they've tangibly contributed to the solution that they wish they didn't have to do, because we wish we didn't have to build that home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I heard an example of this just recently from a colleague who was talking to a woman who had experienced domestic violence, and her partner had punched holes in the wall. And one of the pivotal points in her seeking help and calling that out was a tradesman who actually said, "What's happening? Are you okay?"
Wow.
What a great bystander.
Wow. Probably a tradie that worked on
I reckon.
Bella's Sanctuary. So I've got another question for you, Patrick, before we close out. Many male role models in popular culture, like movies, rely on violence to solve problems. Other ways of being and talking are still associated with being less manly. Who are some popular male icons we can point out to boys that they will want to be like, I suppose, characters in non-violent ways that are, I suppose, non-violent characters?
I think it's a really important question about sort of the sort of masculinity, particularly in large organisations that are predominantly at the upper end, led by males.
Yep.
And the sort of role models we want for people. And I think there's some really great role models talking out at the moment in sport about racism and how that's not okay, and violence in sport is not okay. I think there's also men, and I'm not great on movies, so I can't immediately think of a great movie star, so I might get some help here. But I think it's that masculinity too that actually shares what we're about. I think hearing everyone on the panel tonight actually shared their feelings about what's it about. And some of those dominant ideas of masculinity are about presenting a certain self, is about convincing, about being strong, about being in charge, about being successful, not questioned. And when we actually go into what they actually do, often men are being driven because they think it might help them connect with people or engage, when in fact It does quite the opposite.
Sure.
And I think those sorts of role models that actually open up that conversation about those aspects of toxic masculinity that actually stop men from being real, from revealing their true identity.
Absolutely.
Instead of largely a false identity. I think increasingly in Australian corporate organisation, Paul mentioned it, we've got to hold that accountable where there's leadership at the top that is sexist, doesn't speak out against violence. It's not okay. It can't be tolerated.
We couldn't get a better advocate to be leading the violence prevention beacon at Griffith University than Patrick O'Leary. So I love listening to you. I could listen to you speak about this all night. I think if we made superheroes out of the three men on stage here in terms of those male role models, we'd go a long way to addressing what we need to. So I don't know, we could get some figurines or caricatures made if anyone knows anyone. Thank you everyone on this panel. We are unfortunately out of time. I've got a couple more questions though before we do conclude. So I want to jump to them before we wrap things up if that's okay. I suppose my question to Gavin is, Gavin, more personally, what do projects like the Bystander app, and I mean you're involved in everything, we shouldn't just say the Bystander app, where there's domestic and family violence conversations, you're there at the table. Why? What personally drives you? A
bit like Rach, about 5 or 6 years ago I sort of stumbled across the statistics of domestic and family violence. I couldn't believe how pervasive it was in our society. And I was fortunate enough as a kid to grow up in a world where I didn't even know this stuff was happening. And when I sort of stumbled across it, it was one of those things I just couldn't continue to walk on by. And it then sort of created a bit of curiosity in my view, where I started to look at what was Telstra doing in terms of domestic and family violence. And I quickly learned it was one of the corporate leaders in Australia in terms of both what it provided internally in its employees, but also what it did for society generally as well. And that just spurred me on basically to get more and more involved and to lean in and do whatever it is that I could possibly do to make a difference. And it was a bit like what the Minister said earlier, the government and DV Connect and other organisations can't do it on their own. Telstra is such a large organisation, we can help amplify the issue. We just about reach every household in Australia, whether it's through our socials or whether it's through any other media for that matter. We're able to get the awareness out, and I think that's the biggest issue that we face, Shaan, is really awareness and education. And I was certainly one of those people who was not aware and I was not educated about how bad this issue is. And over the period of COVID, it's only gotten worse. And based on that, it's going to take as many people as possible to lean into this matter to try and get it solved once and for all. And it'd be great to live in a world where we're free of violence for women. But we've got a lot of work to do before we get there.
Absolutely. Do you think that Queensland, is in a good position currently to create some really significant inroads or change in that space? Gavin, are you seeing it? Are you feeling it? Being a corporate, leaning into these spaces, are you seeing some of that tangible change?
I think there's... I think we've got a coalition of the willing sort of up here that, people like Rach and, yourself, Shaan, and Paul and others, that there's a lot of people that care about this and there's a lot of people that are doing, as I said with Rach, this is not her day job, but every time I see her, it's DV related and nothing else. And I think we're all prepared to do that because of, the challenge that's in front of us. But I think Queensland is uniquely positioned, but equally we're probably uniquely challenged as well because of the regional remoteness of some of our communities. And that's where organisations like mine can play a big part in those areas as well. But I think that we're well positioned, Shaan. We're having the right conversations. We've got many of the right people involved. And, one of Telstra's core values, which I always go back to, is better together.
Yeah.
And there's no truer word in this case that it's only by us all being working together on this whether we will get a better outcome.
Absolutely. Paul, your personal journey. So your personal journey in this space, I know that Marie was the person that came to you and said, hey, let's do this, but what's your personal journey been?
Well, I'm a little bit like Gavin. I lived in a world where at home it wasn't present. When Marie discussed it with us, I reflected on, in my younger days, I was a solicitor in Beenleigh. And people probably don't think this, but that was the mid-80s. It was a long time ago. And it gave me cause to reflect on what we used to do back then when you'd wander across the Beenleigh Magistrates Court and all you got was a peace and good behaviour order if there was domestic violence. And basically it wasn't worth the piece of paper it was written on.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there thinking, and Marie was providing all of the statistics, and it was just horrifying. And I thought, so let's call that 5 years ago. So I then, so from 1985 to 2015, which is 30 years, I thought, boy, we just haven't gone real far. Because it's still a significant issue. The positive is there was more awareness of it, but in 2015, probably not as much as today. So it was like, we've got so much work to do that we've just got to get on with it, and we've got to make a start. And that was the light bulb moment for me, that reflection that for so long we haven't gone far enough, quick enough. And unfortunately, it's incumbent upon us to come forward with solutions. Well, there's no obvious or instant solution, so we just got to keep grinding away as much as we can. I just want to make a very small comment for those that are in sort of small business that may be watching or have friends in small business. Recently, local government association approached ourselves and Warren from Telstra, and we, with Telstra, donated some money and some technology, which Gavin can explain the technology. I'm never good at it, but basically it gave mum and the kids unlimited right to phone and data. And we went down to Woman & Co, and I was talking to Stacey Ross, the CEO, and it just was another version of the conversations with DV Connect in the early days, that she appreciated the support so much but just didn't know how to go about obtaining it.
Yeah.
So anyone that's in small business out there, just go and knock on the door of a support service. Talk to your local member, talk to your local counsellor, find out who they are, and just go and knock on the door and say, hey, can we give you a hand? And that's a way of starting, and I'd encourage everyone to consider that, because what you'll get out of that will not only be the benefit to many other women and children, but it will also benefit enormously your own business.
And Paul, I see you at every round table that's got to do with domestic violence, particularly domestic violence and homelessness. You're at a lot of those conversations. So your passion has grown exponentially since being on this journey too, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, and it was seeing the impact Bella's Sanctuary had on every supplier, every contractor, every Halcyon employee, every Halcyon homeowner. Then, most importantly, hearing the stories about the impact it had on the mums and the kids, and particularly the kids. And it was clearly breaking a cycle, and it was making that change. It was not a temporary fix, it was a permanent fix. So it was like, okay, we did good, now let's just keep doing good, It's not that hard.
And one little example I want to give of that, Paul, when you and Marie created this Bella's Sanctuary, one of the things that Marie said was, I want to make it nice. I want to make it a beautiful place for these women and children to feel like they are home, they are safe and they are home. And we have had, I can't even tell you the amount of women that have walked in there and their first response has been of tears and of gratitude, of saying, I cannot believe there's like clean linen on this bed, and I cannot believe that, what do you mean I've got my own bed and it's a comfy bed and it's warm and nice? There was one woman that just couldn't believe that she could actually use the aircon, because that was a first for her. I can lie on my bed, I can turn on this air conditioning. I'm not worthy of it. How do I, what do I do? So those are stories we don't often tell when we talk about women entering somewhere like this, but a place where they can unpack their bags into the wardrobes is sometimes a first for these women who have lived in this type of, perhaps they've been to refuge 15 times, they've never been able to unpack a bag. So what you've created is absolutely life-changing.
It was a team effort, honestly, it wasn't. But I'll take the opportunity to say that what the team have created at Bella Sanctuary is something we want others to copy. That's why we did the video. The video wasn't about any form of self-promotion. It was about giving people the opportunity to watch it and say, we want to do it. So we got the plans, you can have them, and you can just go out and do it yourself. And Mirvac and other land developers, I'm sure, would be keen. So, we've done it in a way that it was to be replicated. And the lady that donated the beds, she'll donate more beds.
Yep.
The company that donated the air conditioning, I can still hear them now. When's the next one?
Yep.
So there's no limit of support that's available. It just has to be harnessed.
Mm. And you have local residents who do like fundraisers and raise,
Yeah, the Halcyon homeowners do welcome packs for the kids and school packs and cake drives, and and that then brings the community in, and that then adds benefit to their lives and gives them more purpose. And just because you're over 65 doesn't mean you haven't been the victim.
Absolutely.
And it's touched a lot of families within the Halcyon communities.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Rach, you don't do things by halves, and you actually, in the early days, had a massive big white ribbon splashed across one of the biggest trucks that Rio Tinto has. What are you going to do big next in this space?
So I guess coming back to what Gavin said earlier, it's not about doing big things, it's actually about setting the leadership to allow people to feel empowered that they can make a difference where they are. So the truck you're talking about is in North Queensland in Weipa. I got surprised by it. I got a picture and went, this is awesome, and there were two men standing by the truck, really proud that they'd managed to get it painted in a big white ribbon, because we became a white ribbon workplace. For me, I think the big thing is the movement of activating our people and what you can do. So if it's the small things, if we can save or improve one life, that's success. It's not throwing in, we don't build houses, but we do have houses in regional Australia, in remote Australia. So we do provide, when there is access housing, to different services that are there. So it's continuing that momentum. I think the big thing for us, it's going to sound maybe not that big, but it's around the policy and the support that we provide. So it's changing the language of that's more accessible for everybody. Mm-hmm. We took the leadership of Telstra, and Telstra, set the bar in Australia for what corporates should do. So we leveraged what they had. For me, the big thing is two big things. One is making people's lives better, whether they're in our business or outside, and however we can do that, big or small. And the small things often have a huge impact. As you talked about, the woman who hadn't used the air conditioning. If we can provide someone with a dressing gown for their kids, to give them that dressing gown where the kids have never been able to give their mother a present before. Yeah. When you hear the stories of that, you just go, wow, like it stops me in my tracks. So those little things change people's lives in a big way. But then, the policy and engaging men in our organisation, in the communities in which we operate, is really, really critical. And how do we do that to prevent it before it even starts, or stop it when it has started, is, I guess, the next frontier that we're all scratching our heads around, but talking to the right people in the sector and community members and everyone coming together. So to me, they're not big banner things, but they'll hopefully have a large impact.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Rach. So, Patrick, our final question, and I know we're running out of time. You are now the director of the Violence Prevention Beacon at Griffith University. You have heard from these incredible humans about the impact they're having within corporate Australia. How can the Beacon work in with them? What is it that you're offering through the Beacon that can further enhance the work that they're all doing in this space?
Absolutely, and I think that the Beacon is very much about community partnerships, and part of that is corporate partnerships to look at the impact. And it is it's part of Griffith's DNA around social justice that it's committed to a beacon on violence to address that from both a prevention but also a justice point of view. And so I think that the chance to work with, for example, these fine people who are real leaders and trailblazers in their work and work with the community, not just with their corporate organisation, to find the impact. What's the impact? I think companies are more interested when we, for example, could research the Disrupting Violence Beacon on the cost benefits of this.
Yeah.
That it actually, can pay back.
Yep.
And we can actually take responsibility, like the perpetrator example of how it could be managed within a employer and authorities to really dig down deep into how that could work in a really practical way. So it's very exciting to have the Beacon to be able to resource and prime the pump for these sorts of initiatives. And innovation has come out from our three corporate leaders today in a very big way about thinking about how we innovate, and that's very, very important for the Beacon, to innovate and then translate that into action on the ground.
Absolutely. And I can tell from the lots of questions that are coming through, Patrick, that our alumni are really enjoying the opportunity to link in and ask questions that are of you, but also of corporates. And perhaps we need to provide more opportunities for people to be asking these really practical questions of some people that are, that are leading the way in this space. So thank you to everyone on this panel tonight. I'd like to personally thank everyone on here. Absolute legends, aren't they? Absolute legends. Thank you so much for the time that it's taken to prepare for tonight, but also to bring your whole self to this discussion. I love your courage, particularly you, Paul, in just calling it out and saying, just sack them. I agree with you. We will send out an email shortly to everyone in the audience with a YouTube link where you can access this at a later date if you want to revisit some of the things we discussed. But also there'll be a short survey, and I'd love for everyone to answer that, particularly around what else could we bring you, what else do you want to hear from people like the people on this panel tonight, but also from academics like Professor Patrick O'Leary. If you've been inspired by the discussion tonight, I invite you to get in touch to learn more and also to support our program, the MATE program out of Griffith University. We receive requests to deliver our training. Sometimes those requests are for remote communities or in places where they don't have the funding to run them. So if by chance you have the opportunity to perhaps sponsor an organisation or a community to do the MATE training, we would love your support. If you want to know more about what we do in alumni engagement or ways that you can continue to be involved, please link in with us on our socials. And I want to personally thank Bridget, wherever Bridget is, because Bridget is the person that brought all of this together tonight and made it all happen, and also our very own Nicole Hunter, who was instrumental in making tonight happen. For now, though, I want you to join me in thanking our incredible panel of change makers and trailblazers, and please enjoy the rest of your night.